Hello, fellow splitting geniuses. Welcome to another episode of Splitting Smart. I am your host, Lila Aiken Ali, and we're excited to have you join us today. At Splitting Smart, we believe that knowledge is power, and we strive to educate you on the specific parts of divorce puzzle by having candid, informative discussions with divorce and well-being professionals. And today we have a special guest joining us, Jordan Rosenberg, a family lawyer and an accredited certified financial litigator at a premier law firm in Chicago, the Windy City, and the North Shore. Jordan is highly acclaimed by his clients who have called him a rare lawyer for his exceptional blend of professionalism and empathy, which I love. He's patient and he explains the legal complexities of divorce with clarity, making him an invaluable resource for his clients. And I cannot agree any more. So I would say that with that, as a divorcee and a divorce coach and the co-founder of Split FYI, I'm thrilled to be hosting this important discussion around the legalities of divorce. And I am sure that will leave you empowered and equipped to tackle the divorce puzzle. So grab a coffee and welcome to today's episode. Hi, Jordan.
Awesome. Lila, thank you so much for having me. And it's just, I love what you guys are doing. And I think it's just an awesome resource. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. And I mentioned earlier, when we're interviewing, especially the legal counsel involved in divorce, it really has to kind of be aligned and in tune with what our ethos on how to approach divorce. Obviously we know that litigation exists and that happens and we can't stop that from happening, but our way and our approach is a very holistic in the way that it's all encompassing, that you really need to look at it as not in there for a fight, just there to, unravel something that is happening in my life that once was, it's not anymore. And let me get educated. Let me make the smart decisions out of a place of education and understanding and support rather than out of fear. So, yeah. And I've listened to, what you've said on Instagram. I watch you on social media and I really enjoy listening to what you have to say. So happy
That's
that
awesome.
You're here.
That's awesome. And just like you said, I think it's so important. I mean, one of the things I often tell my clients is surround yourself by a team of professionals, because just like you said, it's a puzzle, right? A divorce puzzle. How do you put the pieces together? How do you get to the finish line? And so to me, and this is probably something we'll talk about, but one of the things that I think to work with your divorce lawyer and keep your head cleaner and making sure that you're making the good decisions for yourself is to having those outlets and those coaches and the resources from outside just the legal to be able to fit that puzzle all together and kind of move through that process efficiently.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I realized that, going through my own divorce, that I was so heavily reliant on my legal counsel and my lawyer that I felt like I was being overwhelmed, overwhelming her, and she was amazing. And so I have no, problems with that, but she couldn't fulfill every need,
Right.
that I was in desire for, or I needed, or even the education. I think we'll go through that, but I wanted to, so we could define what a healthy relationship is with your lawyer. But
Yeah.
beyond that, I realized that one of the things that having, a full holistic approach to your support system is that when you are listening to your lawyer, and this is what I would say, is that you're so overwhelmed with your fear and your emotion that you literally retain maybe like 20% of all the things that are said, right? So do you often find that when you're talking to your clients, it's like, do you check in on how do you operate with that? Because you must notice that they're not actually understanding half of that stuff.
I mean, of course. And I mean, you can tell when the wheels are turning in their heads and, you're trying to explain something to them in some meaningful way. And, you're trying to be patient and understanding. And of course, that's the way to do it. But sometimes I'll just get like a random question where that wasn't on train of thought. And we're like, well, we're talking about children and all of a sudden, well, what about maintenance? Okay, well, we can shift there, no problem. But to me, and this is kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is it's about relationship, I think. And you have that trust with your lawyer and you can relate to them and they're talking to you like a person rather than a client. To me, that relatability, and even just like this conversation that we're having, it's like, if you can have that relationship with your lawyer and you're having a conversation, to me, it's way easier than just being spouted information. So, I mean, a lot of times, even with that, it's difficult. And so what I often do, we have these conversations. I always encourage my clients that if you're struggling to understand something through an email or a phone call, come on in person. Let's do a Zoom, because that obviously feels different than just an email, I often leave my clients with an email as well. We're just recapping our conversation. So when you walk out the door and you've got a million other questions, and you're like, wait a minute, what did we talk about? Then at least you have it back referring to it. And, most times that spurts another conversation, but that's okay too. And at least you have it, you can process it on your own and formulate whatever follow-up questions you have.
It's one of the things that I always tell my clients when I'm coaching them is that if they haven't found, a lawyer to represent themselves, it's really important for them to explain to the lawyer their modality of communication that they prefer, right? So, we're all in different stages of our years, and it's like, like for my mother's age group, right? For example, we'll take it, they don't like emails. They want the phone. They need the conversation, and vice versa. And then some like text, some like email. So it's really important to kind of establish that, right? And
I completely agree. And actually, I have a podcast, or I just had a podcast come out on it, or a little informational reel thing. But I think the best thing you can do with your lawyer is exactly what you just said, is establish the process for setting up that communication, right? If you work the best through email, then say that and tell your lawyer. If you need to come in person, fine. But this is your life, right? It's your process, it's your journey. Same thing is, we're trying to find the puzzle pieces to fit together that's going to make that holistic approach the best for you. So to me, zero issue with that. And it's every client's different. And some people just want to talk on the phone, which is fine. Some people want to just, knock out emails, and that's okay too. But everybody processes information differently. Everybody understands information a little differently. And so to me, when you're interviewing lawyers, and again, I think you should interview lawyers, it's that relatability and kind of questioning them on what they think or what you think, or how that is going to work together, the best way to communicate, and expectations for that as well.
so, as we all know, and I'm sure a lot of people are thinking at home, like, okay, well, it costs so much money to communicate with your lawyer. Everyone's in fear about that, right?
Yeah. Huge.
We understand that. I mean, listen, lawyers have to make money as well, and they're serving you with an extreme purpose. Like, they have a niche, right, that you cannot understand. It's too difficult for somebody to understand, so you need that. So what are some of and to your point, okay, establish a stream of communication, very important, right? What are some other ways that they could maybe potentially mitigate on those expenses?
Yep.
You have a an answer of, like, because I'm sure that's what they're trying to understand, is like, every time they say, oh my God, if I write an email, it's going to be $400. If I got to do this, it's going to be this. It's they're already doing that. And so what I find is, a lot of my clientele, in fact, and in our community, often they won't ask what they need to ask. So they don't have the reassurance. What that seeps into is fear. And then that fear starts catastrophizing into an outcome that hasn't even happened yet.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So
I'm with you. I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest fears of most people going through a divorce is cost. And can I afford it? How does it work? And I mean, like you said, that communication with your lawyer is so important, but I agree. I mean, it costs money. So to me, and just kind of thinking on the fly, I mean, there's three, I guess, ways to mitigate in your mind, sort of, that either the cost is worth it or a way to mitigate the cost in general. So to me, the divorce, they call it a divorce process, right? It's not just, we're stamping it, now you guys are paying your own bills, you're moving into your own home, you've got your own life, you've got your own time with your kids. It's not snap fingers, it's a process, right? But you have to learn how to kind of function on your own and think on your own, right? And it's that rudimentary. It's just it's a process. So to me, it's sort of worth it a little bit as an investment to sort of use your lawyer as a sounding board, learn, right? Knowledge is power, about ways to respond, ways to act, things to communicate, be efficient. And so, yes, it's a cost, but transitioning from one family to two families, I think it's an investment. I think in a lot of ways makes sense and is worth making. Number two, I would say before communicating with your lawyer, like take a breath, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to like stream of thought email or, talk for 2 hours about something that's not poignant. And so the best that you possibly can, try to streamline yourself. And I think a good way to do that is exactly what you guys offer.
Yeah.
And it's that support system. It's sort of like almost like parceling out sort of like the emotional a bit to like the early legal, here's what your rights are type thing. So even if we're saying, well, how am I going to afford this? How am I going to pay this? How does this work? How does that work? Okay, well, we work with someone like you guys where you have those coaches and, they have that nuanced knowledge, right? Or how do you process it? Co-parenting specialists, right? Even like career coaching. That's not, while it's very important, it's probably not something you want to discuss directly with your divorce lawyer and actually get feedback. Now, it's important to the strategy for me to know what your goals are and what you're struggling with. But specific questions on those areas, if you can kind of like trim the fat, so to speak, and really sort of like streamline and be efficient with your communication, worth the investment. And also, use your outside sources to make sure you're being efficient.
Yeah, I actually love what you just said, because it is that take a breath moment. It's the trigger. You're highly triggered in so many ways. Each way, like everything is, something that just heightens your fear, right? And so you want to be reassured with your lawyer, but sometimes you're just throwing at them things that you haven't even thought through yourself. I mean,
Right.
I've had examples of clients. I myself probably have done this too. I get an email, I get a notice, I get a message from my ex or something, and boom, I'm sending it to my lawyer. I'm sending it to my lawyer. It's like I'm literally bouncing it off of me and sending it to the lawyer. Or my clients have done that. I've had clients who send it to me and send it to their lawyer. I was like, wait a minute.
Right.
The whole idea of having me is taking a breath. Exactly. You didn't even need to address this with your lawyer. It literally has nothing to do with legal. So, there's all of that is just this heightened fear that's doing it. So take a deep breath and wait for a hot minute and realize what is important is exactly true. Like, is this something that I think is relevant and is important? I should send it to my lawyer. If not, it's something that I could probably wait. And maybe it's when I meet my lawyer, I will explain it to them,
Right. And most times questions like that, I mean, even in the conversation, get resolved just in having the conversation, right?
Exactly.
And what's really interesting, and now that I'm talking about it and actually articulating it, it's sort of the same advice that I would give to a co-parent. And just like you said, when you get an email from your ex and, oh my God, your adrenaline starts running and you're like, what do I say? Do I respond immediately? Do I respond emotionally? How do I respond to this? Take a breath. It's not urgent, right? Limit your communication to sort of that more business-like, directly related to the kids type stuff. And if you're getting extraneous things and, well, you did this, I mean, it's just not worth your energy. So I think that taking a breath, while it sounds sort of simple and cliche, it's so powerful in so many ways, because you're able to sort of like recenter yourself. And just like you said, process the information for yourself before you pawn it off to another person.
Well, this is the thing. It's all threats, right? They're so threatening, all these emails and messages that are coming at you, that you need that reassurance. But at the same time, the truth. And a lot of these are just threats to unravel you. And so it's understanding and deciphering, what are the things I do need to address? If there's an accusation that clearly I need to address it, okay, but let me give myself a hot minute before I do address it. Otherwise, it just becomes a ping pong of accusations back and forth. And then you've got your lawyer involved, and now you're spending money with your lawyer who really doesn't have, can't be in that fight for you.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
can address it in a lawyer to lawyer email, but it can't be in that, that fight with you. So
And
that's
I guess, and the other thing, Lila, is like, I mean, when we're talking about sort of, making, streamlining costs and stuff like that, and even this, what we're talking about in reactions and how you react and stuff like that. I mean, as a lawyer, it's important to counsel your clients to say, let's pick your battles.
Yeah.
Right? And are we gonna, burn the house down for $10,000-$20,000 fighting about, our, pickup time and 30 minutes here? And I mean, and the lamp at the end of the bed, like, and while those might trigger an emotional response, I mean, I think it's your lawyer's job, in addition to sort of your support system, to recenter you, reground you, and help you take a breath, right?
Yeah.
Part of that process, and learning how to like be present and handle these situations on your own. And that's exactly, again, I think what you guys do, and what I like to think I do as a lawyer, in trying to teach my clients how to get to the other side of this.
Yes. Be smart through it all and be strategic, not
Right.
impulsive and reactionary, is
Absolutely
ultimate and key, because no good decision is made out of fear. None. And anger.
Completely agree.
So yeah, it's important. With that, I actually, and we interviewed a few lawyers that have, everyone has some different take, and I'm curious to hear, like, when somebody is working with one, what is the best way for them to prepare themselves? And I know, state to state is all very different, that what they need, and collate all these documents, and not really so much as that, but like, is there something that you tell them when you have an initial consultation, like what, how to best prepare working with you, for example?
Yep, that's a great question, and probably one of the most common questions I get. And I think the answer is honestly pretty obvious when you actually break it down. But frankly, it's like, I guess it's a starting point. You have to be in a place in your head that you're making this decision for yourself. And you can't be influenced by outside factors. And this is what's best for you, and for, if you have children, and it's not, your mom or your friend or your dad or, your cousin, get divorced. I mean, no, this is a decision, as a threshold matter that you have to be at peace with. And once you get there, and, most times when people come to my office, they're already there. Right. If you come to somebody's, I mean, to me, that's a huge step in contacting a divorce lawyer, massive. And so when I think you get, one of the things that I tell my clients to do is just be organized and start collating your finances, write down what you know, start documenting what you're seeing in the house. I mean, I always say, be really careful what you put in writing. Because nowadays it's all, everything's text message, email, especially with a divorcing spouse. I mean, you're glued to your phone if you're texting your spouse. I mean, all of that, I would just be very careful and keep things business-like with your spouse. But to me, it's organization, and that's huge. And it's organizing yourself, understanding and trying to, collate your finances and your documents. And really, depending on the issues in your case, follow your lawyer's lead. And there's some trust factor here that's earned. And it's not something where you walk into somebody's office and, okay, I'm your guy, blindly follow my lead. No, I mean, you got to have those conversations. I'm a person. I'm not just a lawyer, right? I'm kind of with you in this process while we're trying to fill in that puzzle, like you said. So to me, it's really organization and sort of like prompt responsiveness to your lawyer, which is always helpful, and just business-like, dialogue with your soon-to-be.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because that is, people think about it, but they don't think about what could, they think about it afterwards. Oh my God, should I have said that? Should I have done that? And then they start worrying so much about how they're communicating. But you wouldn't have to worry so much if you did keep it super business-like. Totally. You got to change the tune. You have to, because it is, you are in, you're in a case, like you have to, there's a certain thing with anybody, you have to be there, like anything could be used against you. They could try to use it against you. So it is important to do that. And also social media, I'm sure that you've like it told people to
Oh, yeah.
be very careful what you're posting and saying out there on social.
Well, right. And I mean, and while I think social media is awesome and it's very informative and it's great, I mean, it could also be, I mean, you have to be careful what you're posting out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're, especially if you're in the middle of a divorce, I mean, like, you don't want to publicize your divorce. I mean, nobody does. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe in the moment and after you've processed it, I mean, just like you, Lila, you're sharing your story, you've created this awesome platform and this community for people. That's different than when you're in the throes of it and you're disparaging your husband or your wife or taking pictures with your kids. It's just not appropriate. So from my perspective, in terms of privateness, is I would just like you said, is kind of keep it off there.
100%.
Yeah.
So what are the common mistakes that you see people doing when they're working with you or with lawyers in general? Like, is there a common mistake that people can think, they're like, oh, I think I'm doing this? I mean, besides that, not thinking before you're throwing everything at your lawyer.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge though.
That's a big one.
huge. That's huge. And that's a really common thing. And I was about to ask you sort of the same question, was like, is there something that you guys see that's like the biggest fear or the biggest mistake people make, at least from your perspective? But at least from my perspective on this side, it is that not sort of thinking and processing that on your own has so many tentacles into what leads to mistake. But I think that's the root of really it all is if you're not communicating, if you're not processing it before you're talking to your lawyer, if you're not processing information before you're talking to your ex, if you're making a snap financial decision, if you're like, oh my God, I got to buy a car. Well, that's probably not what's best for your case, but I wish you would have talked through with that with me for a little bit. And really, I mean, and I think one of the mistakes and where there's a lot of synergy, obviously, in what we're doing is to have that community of professionals to be able to sort of like really streamline and parcel out the emotional aspect to the divorce process.
The business of the divorce process.
But it's like impossible. I mean, it's your life, right? So it's not something that you can really easily parcel out, but at least if you're being fulfilled and appreciated in one aspect with the emotional and the support aspect, then you can have better dealings, I think, with your divorce lawyer. But from my perspective, it's, again, just you have to be organized, follow direction, and have a strategy and insist on strategy with your lawyer. And if it's just mindlessly filing things and asking for documents, like, what's the purpose of that, right? So I guess a mistake could also be engaged and be insistent with your lawyer as to what's our strategy here. So I guess from and I kind of want to shift it back on you guys, is there, like, what do you see as like biggest mistakes or biggest fears or like things in your community that just come up and you're like, wow, this is really a common thing that, maybe we didn't know about?
So there's a lot, but I will say, and why I say there's a lot is because it is all fueled by emotion at the end of the day. But if you think about it, first of all, everybody has a different situation. Some people are really angry. Some people are really sad that their relationship has ended. Some people are really angry because they've been sideswiped or just, hurt in the process. And it fuels a lot of the fight. And the fight is that this notion that somebody is actually going to win. I think this is the biggest problem. And I'm sure you see it, that, you get a lawyer because you want to go win. And it's like, you're not getting a lawyer to win. Nobody wins. We know there is no winning in divorce. Unfortunately, there's nothing, there is no winning. And there's no fair, right? Fair is the F word of divorce. So, and a lot of people will come to us and it's like, well, that's not fair. And their head can't get past that it's not fair. The head can't get past that, the fear comes from what the other person is going to do. So their ex, because of how they've operated for so long, or they've been in control for so long. And so the fear puts them in like, well, I need to become, in control. I need to get more control of this because they're going to continue to do this or they're going to do that. And it's catastrophizing. So there's a lot, right? So I would say that there's the fight that it's not fair and I want to win. and nobody wins. And so
Right.
they keep fighting because they think that something is going to happen. And it's that catastrophizing. So it's like, oh my God, then this is going to happen and that's going to happen because out of the fear. So again, it's all stemmed by emotion,
Yeah.
which is very hard because you're sitting there with a client and you're like, well, teaching them and strategizing with them and, really educating them on the law
Right.
and what could happen.
Mhm.
And anything can happen if it goes to court. So
Right.
that's the wild, wild west. And there is like, then there's a third party making a decision for your life. So let's not try to get there. So how can we mitigate that? And let's work together. And I find that it's very hard for somebody going through it to actually, because they're in that amygdala brain, they're fight or flight, they're all up here
Oh, yeah.
to actually understand strategy. So,
And you know what's so interesting about that is, and that's really, I mean, I don't often get that perspective, which I wish I did, more often.
Mhm.
I think that would help me with my clients. But
Yeah.
what's also interesting is there's this phenomenon almost in every divorce case where it's like, we're leading up to the judgment. Okay. The judgment's going to be the end. You're going to get divorced. You're going to have this massive weight off your back. I mean, what I'm assuming, and because there's not a lot of follow-up unless there's post-decree issues, and I try to stay in touch with people, but it's not this monkey off your back, right? It's not this amazing feeling of relief. Oh my God, I'm done, right?
Mhm.
You still have children, you still have an ex-spouse, there's still a financial tie between you
Mhm.
guys, there's still dividing the assets. I mean, it doesn't really end.
Mhm.
And it's never, and again, it's just that divorce process. And you're always in the divorce process, basically,
Mhm.
right?
And with
So
kids, you're always in it.
always,
It's a different relationship, I call
oh
it. It's
yeah.
like you're still married. It's just a different type of marriage.
I mean, there's grandkids, there's graduations, there's
Mhm.
there's everything. And I mean, to see your ex and be triggered and sort of like have that stuff come running back. I mean, it's always a process. So for
Mhm.
me, I mean, and you deal with, I think, a lot of clients sort of like post divorce,
Mhm.
right? And like kind of helping them create a new life. And I mean, am I
We
wrong?
we yeah, we know we have it in every stage of
Yeah,
the process. But what's interesting, what I'm
yeah,
finding is the post-divorce, there's a lot that just stay because there are like we're trying to figure out a lot of things, the dating, the co-parenting, the career, the moving
right,
on, eh, figuring out the self-esteem part of things of going, whoa, wait a minute, now I've got a whole new life that I'm living. And it's like, what
right,
now? What next? I had so
right,
many clients who are done with their divorce. Are like, what now?
right.
Like, what's going?
Exactly. I mean, and
Mhm.
that's like, and again, I'll go back and maybe it's a shameless plug, but I love what you guys are doing because it's
Oh, thank
something
you, though.
that, of course, it's something where it's like you always kind of like, and you want to be there for them as their lawyer and say, okay, well, here's the appropriate financial advisor, here's this person who can help, even set up your bills in your new house, right?
Hmm.
And it's like stuff that maybe you don't think about that like I mean, that's a whole nother universe, and it's like learning a new language, basically. So
It
like
is.
to have that resource and that a community and the ability is just invaluable, I think, to people who have gone through a divorce.
It helps because what happens is, and I always say this, there's a healthy dose of input with a community of people who are going through divorce in different stages because you do learn from listening a lot. We have these community initiatives where we get together on Fridays every morning for coffee talk. We have every other Saturday. We've got Wednesday mornings. We've got this community building aspect of it, which they are learning from one another. And even though their stories are different, you can see that, oh yeah, maybe I'm actually doing that too. One of the biggest things I see, the division of a house, huge, whether
Right.
you have kids or not.
Yep.
That usually is always the biggest one, right? And so if there's a house ownership, and so that there's an emotional tie to that. It's not just financial, and it's differentiating, understanding that, like, how much do I need to put the fight in to figure this out? And so when they're
Right.
listening to other people who've gone through it, it kind of helps to understand, okay, maybe I could see it in a different way. It's
Yeah.
just opening up a door of possibility to look at things in a different way because you can't be so rigid. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you see this, that there are, we know what you want, and it would be amazing that you could get that. But there's a process, like you say, to get to that. And actually, you might have to go this way rather than that way. And
Yeah.
so what does that other way look like? You know?
That's what I say in my world, in my legal, I guess, lingo would be,
Mhm,
what you want is different than what you're entitled to.
mhm.
So
Exactly.
reconciling those and saying, well, what I want is X number of dollars a month so I can live in this beautiful place and I can base my lifestyle doesn't have to change. But what I'm entitled to is just like what you're saying, is there has to be some flexibility and adaptability. And even if it's not the best home and what you're used to, you make it your own, right?
Yes.
You get this, you set up this awesome space. You got plants in the background like you got, like you have, and it's like you got your own home
Mhm,
office, you got your own cute little kitchen. I mean, like,
mhm,
to me,
mhm.
it's about starting fresh, and that's, I think, in that flexibility and being able to kind of think less rigidly. I think is huge for my clients.
So with that, I have this question, and hopefully won't throw you off because it's an interesting thing that comes up in our community quite a bit. And because you have the financial way for all, which is, by the way, I want to add gold dust for having a, not just a legal counsel, but having someone who really understands the financial side of things.
Yeah,
Um, but a lot of people going through it peg their worth to their settlement. Okay.
totally,
And yeah.
absolutely, I get
And
it.
no, but that's a very hard thing because it's now, to your point, what you said earlier, it's like, what are you entitled to? Doesn't
Right.
mean it's your worth. It just means this is the legalities of things. And, how do you, I'm sure this comes across to you a lot because everyone is saying, well, that's, is that my worth? Is that my this? And their self-esteem drops down
Right.
because they're pegging that entitlement to their worth,
Oh
so to
yeah,
speak. So,
yeah. And that's such an interesting phenomenon because it's almost like, when people post about social media and they've got, they're on these amazing vacations with their families and everybody's happy, and you're comparing yourself, I think, to other people. So
mhm.
in the divorce community, what I find is, well, so and so got this in their divorce, and I Googled this. They said, well, I might be entitled to this. And so
Oh,
they're always trying to say, well, is what I got sort of the best? And did I win? Did I get better?
mhm.
And like you said, there's absolutely no winner. I mean, there's no winner, period, right?
Mhm.
So it's, you know, don't compare yourself to other people. Every sort
Mhm.
of divorce is unique and has different issues and different personalities and, different financial circumstances and different children, maybe different needs, right? So I think you're doomed when you compare yourself to other people and you
Mhm.
and you sort of find your worth through your divorce settlement. I mean,
Mhm.
you have to diversify a little bit. And this is a calamity in your life. Get through it. This is what you have. Do what's best. Make the best of it. Right. Like I said,
Mhm.
establish a nice place, team
Mhm.
up with good people, help yourself, and don't feel bad about yourself or good about yourself because of the settlement you got, because then you're still tied to this process. And
Yeah.
everything about what your life is, well, I get $3,000 a month.
Mhm.
Okay, well, great. Like, but now you're reminding yourself over and over and over and over of this horrible experience that you just went through. So,
Right.
and it's, the F word. I love that. And I'm going to start using that.
Yeah, it
Fair.
is.
I love that.
Yeah,
I
it
love
is the
that.
F word. We say it often. We tell
I love
people,
that.
yeah.
Nothing's fair. It's all within the realm of reason. And I think what I was going to say is at least, 90% of my cases, probably higher, end up in that little Venn diagram in the middle section where it's reasonable, right?
Mhm.
Like at some point you team up with the right professionals, you have the right lawyer, you kind of move through the process. Even if it's super, super, super litigated, you're
Mhm.
really not going to deviate, I think, from that little sense of reasonable in that
Mhm.
diagram. So
Right.
I guess even going back to what you were saying earlier about the cost and fairness and everything like that. And, you said, people team up with a lawyer to fight, right?
Mhm.
Well, and, I don't think that's always the case.
Right.
And I hope that's not always the case because I think having a lawyer in any process that you choose, whether it's mediation, whether you're going through a more litigious process or you're engaging in something completely out of court. I mean, to have the brain that knows what the law is and to guide you towards that middle section, I mean, it's invaluable. So, I mean, if you're in mediation with just your husband or just your wife, and one of you is more financially savvy than the other, or, if it has a different skill set in terms of negotiation, or there's a power dynamic that's transcending from the marriage into this now negotiation, those are the situations where I find sort of end up outside the realm. And especially if somebody feels remorse for something they did, and it's, well, I have to make up for this, so I'm going to give him or her more in the divorce settlement. Those are really the situations. But, like you said, I think that probably 85% of my cases, I'd say 15% of my cases take up about 80% of my time. So
Interesting.
I would say more often than not, you're not running to court litigating. Most cases are handled amicably. It's most cases are like that. And so, what I always say is you prepare for the worst, right? But hope for the best. And
I like that.
I mean, it's super simple, but preparing for the worst is, make sure you're organized, go through the process, have your ducks in a row. And
it's not thinking it's going to be the worst, because you don't want your mindset to think that it's going to be the worst, but it is that preparation point. That's what I really want to make clear. I love what you said. It is not about going into catastrophe mode and saying it's going to be all bad. It's more like, in order for me to kind of mitigate any of those issues, like, let me just make sure I've got all the paperwork, all the things I need. I'm in the right mind frame. Right. And I'm listening and learning and strategizing and actually taking on board what my lawyer says.
Right. And how much more coachable are those clients for you that are prepared and organized and have, and are in that mindset already? Like, the ceiling for that, there's not as much of a learning curve in terms of getting to just stasis, right?
Right.
It's, to me, that it seems like you'd rather have a client who's there. I mean, not rather, but basically who wants to be there.
It wants to be there. And I get the emotion. I mean, it is such a ball of fire that's going on in your mind, and every part of you is being threatened. And so when that happens, it's very hard to see clearly and compartmentalize. But it's a process like that, like anything. You'll get there. You just want to start. You want to have to start. And so relying on the professionals around you that are guiding you to do that, they mean that, like, you're going to have a better outcome in the end if you can prepare yourself and start compartmentalizing and start really, just working on a way that you're not overwhelmed. So take it one little step at a time. Not everything has to be resolved all at once.
Right. And not even in terms of like a better outcome in terms of financial or a kid's schedule, but mentally and emotionally, like, you will be in a better place if you put the work in, basically. If you bury your head in the sand, that's not good. You have to just front it, deal with it, and take it head on if you're going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. But, and then I think this is where, these conversations are super important, because I feel that people, the more that they hear that it is very doable to use legal counsel in your divorce, whether it is if you're in mediation and you have a consulting lawyer, but have the legal counsel, understand the law, understand where you stand, is really, really important. Having those professionals around you that are helping you and supporting you and teaching you, and then you can make the right decision, or the right decision for yourself. But the decision is then yours. It's not somebody else's. And that's what's really important, where you're getting someone to, right? It's not your lawyer's decision. It's not the judge's decision. It's not, somebody else's, it's yours. That's the beauty. Right. Exactly.
And it's, to me, it's about controlling your own life, right? And controlling what you can control. And like you said way earlier in this cast, was, you don't want a third party to make decisions for you. So to the extent that you can, negotiate your own settlement with your lawyer, right? Or be in control of, well, am I getting this much by a check and the rest as paid directs to my children? Or can we be creative? Because the law and the judge, there's not a lot of creativity. It's fairly straightforward, and the court has authority to just act in certain ways. But if you're negotiating something and you have goals and you have, I really just kind of want to be X, consult with your lawyer, and I think you're able to get there more creatively than if you were just to have a judge decide that. But it's taking control of yourself, taking control of being organized, taking control of your emotions. And I think if you just, like I said, if you bury your head in the sand, I just don't think that's one of the circumstances that's going to end up outside of the middle in that Venn diagram.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Fair, right?
No, it really isn't. It is, again, when it's simple mathematics, as we know, is that, when something was 2 and then it becomes half and it's now just half, you're going to lose a couple of things, and you're going to have, there's give and take for everything. And it's just understanding that mindset in it is very important. And having somebody there to help you negotiate what is important for you is super, is gold dust, because it's hard to do it for yourself. I know that.
I have a question for you. To that end, have you, and what's your thought process on working with your clients and their divorce lawyer?
I do it often, and I think it's brilliant. I think that for them, what I have realized is that it's helped them be less reliant on their lawyer for certain things that they didn't need to be, which actually in return makes their lawyer a lot happier to work with them on the things that they can work, because it's in their scope. They've always said to me, it's like, I can't be the therapist. I can't be, in certain circumstances, especially the CDFA or the dating coach or all of these things. As much as I would love to, help them around those things, that's not my wheelhouse. And I really need to concentrate on the things that really is the strategy, negotiation, getting them to the place or closer to the place of the things that they really want and desire. Right. And so that's where my lane is. And so it really helps. It helps the client because they're learning, right? I often help, them with the communication. So writing an email, writing a text message. Okay, so that's great. Let's take now all the emotion out of it. And then we're left with like one sentence.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to send. And the more that you do that, the better you get at it, right? You don't need your lawyer to write an email about picking up Johnny from school a little bit earlier. You don't.
I've done it. Right.
Sure, you have.
I mean, and sometimes they call us, armchair therapists, or, we're counselors for a reason. Right.
Yep.
And I think there has to, I don't think there's just a starch, only legal, emotional aspect. There has to be some blend, but, I love that. And to be able to sort of have that, it's just like an awesome resource, right? To like,
it's empowerment. It's empowerment. It's like you feel so disempowered when you're going through a divorce, no matter what, whether you wanted it, whether you didn't want it. It is an unraveling of your life that you once had. And so who feels they're in power when that's happening, right? No one can feel empowered. So it's the baby steps to get to a place where you feel empowered enough that you are trusting yourself. That's the hardest bit, because you've lost that trust in self, right? Like you're already questioning your ability to pick the right partner because you're now divorcing. So there's one, and then you've got all these other things that are coming at you. So it's really, there's a big chunk of that trust. And so just what we do is just helping them get back in kind of the driver's seat of their own life. But again, that just kind of works hand in hand with the legal counsel that's helping them understand what their rights are, what their scope is, what would happen in court should they go. All these things are really important to hear and to learn, right? So
what would you, if you had a piece of advice, if you could speak to the entire divorce lawyer community at large, and just said, guys, like, what's the one piece of advice you give all of us in interacting with clients in general,
besides sending them to split FYI all your clients?
Right, exactly.
But on a personal level is, I can imagine, and I'm not saying this about you, but I would imagine that even all doctors or surgeons have a certain degree of okay, I've got to make it, this is another patient, this is another client, I get it. And it kind of gets all messed up, but they're all individuals, and really understanding what that pain point is from that client. What is that place of the most fear that they
Yeah.
have, right? Because it is different. I mean, I've got clients that, yes, a lot of them are financial fears, but quite a few are the children, losing the kids. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you have to understand that the thought process is so fearful that they actually think of things that are not even possible, like losing their children. That's never going to happen, right?
Right.
So, in the law is going to do that unless you're really inept to, be a parent. I mean, that's a whole different story. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that it's understanding what that biggest fear is, and speaking to that to help them on those issues, because that's what stems all the other decisions.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So
I love that.
yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
I would say, and even going a step further, and it's kind of putting you on the spot, but like, how would I address that other than just being human and relatable and just saying, look, just almost like a sounding board for reassurance. I mean, like, how would I address that beyond that?
I think it's almost, and this is where psychology goes in, it's hearing them in their conversations. It's not even finding, because they don't even know. I will tell you, if you ask somebody, what's your biggest fear? They're going to be like, I don't know, kids. I don't know. Like, it could be like so many things. It's the process. It's not going to happen right in the beginning, right? It's going to understanding your client and going, aha, okay, now I see it. This is it. This is literally, okay, so we need to really work on this component and helping them with that particularly. So it is, it's not anything you can do right up front, but it's understanding it and not undermining it, and not trying, right, and not undermining it, because it's, there's a dance, and it's a difficult one. And listen, obviously helping them be the best client they can be with you is really important. I would say all lawyers should be very upfront about like the cost involved in it, and say, yeah, I could write this email for you, but this will cost me this. Whereas you could probably learn, you know what I mean? When you don't need it. I think part of going to their lawyers to write correspondence is because they're so afraid of what's going to happen if they go to court and what their email is going to look like.
Right.
So helping them understand that tone and helping them right out of the gates, like, listen, your safe place is if you go X, Y, and Z, right? Like you say this, you say that, and then end it with this. If you teach them that and it's coming from you, because I can say it till I'm blue in the face, but sometimes it takes a while for them to trust me on that. But if it comes from a lawyer, they'll believe it. If it's coming from a lawyer, it's like, you know what, you're in a safe zone if you communicate this way.
Right.
Done. Here's a template.
Right. I mean, and that's again, awesome feedback. And I think even on a personal level for me, it's like, my wife always, nags on me because I'm a fixer, right? I try to fix things all day. And, it's hard when you're just hearing people's problems and you're, well, do this, do this, do this, do this. Even on my side, take a breath, right? And just kind of bringing it all home. Understand that these people are clients and they're people, and they're going through they're in crisis. So you have to be able to, decode that psychology and make them feel human.
Make them feel human and understand their needs. Sometimes it's not even to be fixed. It's more like they need to be less in fear mode. They need to be, you're brought down from like, oh my God, I'm going to fall off a cliff, and to like, no, you're totally fine. You haven't even gotten up to the cliff yet. Like, it's all okay.
Right. Exactly. Awesome.
Anyway, this is a great conversation. And we're going to put in the show notes where people can find you if they're in Chicago and you do, how does it work in that you can do anywhere in Illinois, or is it just Chicago or?
Pretty much. So as the listeners may know, is divorce is specific state by state, all the laws. So I could technically do Illinois, but I focus more on the North Shore, Chicagoland, DuPage, the surrounding Collier counties is where that's my bread and butter, so to speak.
Got it. Perfect.
There we go.
Well, definitely. I would also say follow you on Instagram. You have some great, your social, which is always nice that, that lawyers do have flavorful colors, and they do work outside of the world of just legal. They're human too, like you said.
Absolutely.
It's been super helpful in this conversation, and I hope that for all of you guys listening out there that you enjoyed it. And I will in our show notes put where you can find Jordan and get in touch with him should you need him. I hope you enjoyed this session. We'll be back with another Splitting Smart soon.